Welcome to the kbbreview podcast, the show all about the ins and outs and ups and downs of being an independent kitchen and bathroom retailer. And this is a very special surprise bonus episode before we officially start our new season in a couple of weeks' time, as we managed to catch up with Sophie Rose, the CEO of Magnet, to get an update on what's happening with them. And as I'm sure you've been following, a lot has happened to them in the last few months. The business returned to quarterly profit in late 2025 for the first time since 2019, and then Nobia exited the UK, selling Magnet to private equity firm Alteri Partners just a few months after Sophie Rose had taken the helm. But the turnaround story has remained very challenging for them. This summer, Magnet proposed a CVA to tackle historic property costs, including immediate plans to close 15 underperforming stores. So, after a year of new ownership, new leadership, and some very significant financial restructuring, where does one of the UK kitchen market's biggest names go from here? Here is KBB Review's very own George Dean in conversation with Sophie Rose.
Thank you so much for being with me today, Sophie. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're very well, and thank you for having me, George, again. It's been a busy and significant few months here at Magnet, so it's great to come and chat with you.
Yeah, and it's great to have you back as well, because I think it was only a few months ago when we spoke for the previous episode of the podcast that we did, isn't it? So in a way, this is almost like a sequel episode, which we don't really get to do very often.
No, it's a real pleasure. I must love hearing my own voice too much.
Well, I mean, you're going to be hearing a lot of it over the next sort of half an hour or so. So obviously, most of our readers and listeners have been following what's been happening with Magnet and the CVA proposals that you guys announced earlier on this year. But before we get into that, I just wanted to get your take on how the company's been and moreover sort of how you've been doing, because it must be a lot of pressure for you being the one calling the shots at the top of that through what sounds like an incredibly stressful process, even though you've come out the other end of it, you know, with your proposals achieved and your creditors voting for the plans that you wanted. But how have you guys been doing?
Yeah, look, it has been, as I said, a significant few months here. I think last time we met, we were making some really great progress, and I think, we were able to report the return to profit in quarter three, which was, a really important milestone and clearly demonstrating some of the great work that was going on to really improve the underlying performance of the business. But, quarter four was challenging and the start of this year has been difficult. I'm sure many others have spoke to you in the same vein. The market's tough. Consumers are definitely still feeling the impact of that cost of living, those wider global tensions, putting further pressure on that, putting pressure on businesses' cost base. So, I think we are definitely seeing projects being delayed in the market, and we are definitely seeing customers procrastinate more. So, I think for us, it's this kind of environment which really makes it super important that every part of your business is operating sustainably, and why we had to make the inevitable but difficult decision and to take further action on our historic property liabilities that we were carrying.
Yeah, because obviously one of the things that you've been sort of really public about is, I think you guys closed, was it 15 stores as part of the initial proposals?
Yes. So 15 stores were closed immediately on announcement of the CVA, and then we are in very proactive landlord discussions with a number of further stores to hopefully reach, more sustainable terms and costs that work for us as a business. And those are progressing well, but we are still in flight with a number of those discussions.
And I can imagine, given the amount of stores that you guys have, it's well into triple digits there, isn't it? Is it 150 at the start of this or somewhere around that number?
Close to 160, actually.
Close to 160, yeah. I mean, it must be so tricky juggling sort of what you need for all of those stores and juggling which ones are the ones you can sort of close. And it must be tricky to decide, looking at your whole estate, which ones you need to close, which ones you have to discuss. And what I think I'm sort of trying to ask is, I know that's the CVA proposals have sort of let you do what you wanted with those, but what other things has that sort of unlocked for you?
Yeah, the CVA, what the CVA has given us, and it's not a, reviewing our property estate and evolving our property estate isn't a new part of our plan. It isn't something that's happened because of the change in ownership. It's not at all. Over the last couple of years, we've been closing a lot of stores organically. where we've been able to exit those stores and agree a suitable deal with the landlord. And we've been relocating a number of stores across those 2 years as well, into kind of our new format model. But what the CVA has really given us is a really targeted way of being able to address those specific locations that were ultimately unsustainable for us, that were not fit for the magnet of who we are today, and were ultimately holding us back. So, that's enabled us to really now look at putting our time and our energy, our focus, our investment into the areas of the business that we do see opportunity in the future, and we do see differentiating Magnet, and we do see growth in.
I discussed with you on the last episode that because Magnet's got such a long history, I think you guys were founded in 1918 or something like that, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes.
It would be almost impossible for you guys to not have to look at an estate with that many stores in it every now and then, at least to shuffle them around, even not within the CVA.
Yeah, exactly. And we have been doing that proactively, over the last couple of years. We reached a point where we had to take further action, and the CVA was the right process for us here at Magnet to do it in a really targeted way with minimal disruption to the business. And that was really important, minimal disruption to the business, minimal disruption to, our suppliers, our creditors, kind of, and really, really focusing on those sites that where we needed to take action.
And I also think Magnet probably isn't unique in the market, especially on the national stage. I think you guys have discussed a lot recently about a strategy where maybe getting out of these bigger stores, maybe in retail parks or somewhere like that, to perhaps look at places like high streets in like a smaller format where you can still sell the same products. You can have design consultations with clients and maybe not need to walk them around a theme park sized kitchen showroom. But what I'm trying to say is, where Magnet is doing that now, I think even not being in the CVA, that's what a lot of national companies are doing, aren't they?
Yeah, and we have we've opened a number of our new format stores over the last couple of years, and they're really working for us. It's really right for who we are today and how our customer is shopping today. The kind of high street or higher footfall locations are great for driving kind of local brand awareness. A lot of our legacy stores that we are closing are in, the kind of back end of industrial sites, and you just don't get that same footfall and awareness and traffic that you do in the locations we're locating in. Of course, the smaller formats, much more sustainable cost base and much less costly to maintain. Some of these large stores are hugely costly and require a large investment, annually almost, to maintain the displays and the sites. And I think thirdly, what we're really trying to create with our new store formats is a really creative and very intimate, very homely and personal space. And that's really important because it really plays to the personal experience that we give here at Magnet and what we want our customers to feel and experience. So yeah, that kind of format for us is working really well, and you will see more of that coming through. Actually, a great example, just to plug our new Harrogate store, actually. We have a new store in Harrogate opening on the 25th of August. So Harrogate is a relocation, was a former larger site on the outskirts of Harrogate. We have a beautiful high street location and a beautiful store opening in a couple of weeks' time, which we're really excited about. And a great example of, where we're able to kind of, move and evolve our property estate, and not necessarily come out of locations altogether.
Yeah, because actually funny you touch on that, because where you mentioned earlier on about sort of Q3 and Q4's results, Magnet had sort of been perhaps not performing as well as it could have for a little while before that, but actually you guys had seen a return to profit, hadn't you?
Yeah, we had, and I think Q3 in the market as well was more buoyant. Certainly when I speak to our suppliers and other people in the industry, it's been a tough start to the year, and everyone's feeling that. And the rising costs, energy costs, for example, are meaning people are having to kind of really remain focused on and ensuring they have a sustainable model.
Because funnily enough, that leads on to a point I was just wondering about, where if Magnet had returned to profitability as your results show, which is fantastic for you, how come you had those sort of historic property costs that were still significant enough to need to enter the CVA? Was it more a case of you just had absolutely so many stores in such big formats like that it almost became inevitable?
Yeah, and some of those stores we had longer leases on, and so the organic option wasn't necessarily a route. And some landlords were prepared to work with us and help us exit the lease early, but others maybe didn't have other tenants lined up, and therefore it's more of a difficult discussion and difficult position for them. So yeah, it's just how the estate has evolved over the years, really. That has meant that we've had to kind of address it through your CVA.
I suppose with that many properties, with that many different landlords, there can't ever be a one-size-fits-all solution for
No.
across your whole estate, can there? I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the other things I wanted to ask about is, obviously last time you came on the podcast, we were talking a lot about Magnet coming under new ownership with Alteri Partners, and you had just come in as CEO. But obviously immediately after that, now the CVA proposals were announced a couple of months after. Was this sort of plan for the CVA something that was maybe in the works when Alteri came on board, or was it something that emerged down the line?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, we've kind of dealing with our legacy property estate is not a new part of the plan. It's been part of the journey and the plan over the last couple of years. We have dealt with as much as we could organically, and we certainly reached the point where we had to make a choice. We continue to allow those remaining liabilities to hold us back, or we move forward with a process like a CVA, which enables us to do it in a very targeted and focused way with, as I said, minimal disruption to the business.
The alternative sort of doesn't bear thinking about, but I suppose you are being very proactive in ensuring the business's future, aren't you?
We absolutely are. And even, alongside the CVA and running up to the CVA, there were a number of deals done with landlords in an organic way. So, we were continuing to do as much as we could outside of the process. But the process was ultimately the choice we had to make in the end.
When you came in, did you have any idea, looking into your crystal ball, that this was maybe something you were going to have to deal with 6 months into the role?
So, again, always knew that property and dealing with that was part of the plan and a real focus for us. And we began exploring ways in which we could deal with that. No crystal ball will ever tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, but we were absolutely prepared for the fact we would need to continue to push forward and address these property issues that we had.
Because I suppose Magnet has been very focused, not just since the CVA started, but I'd say a few years before that I remember when I spoke to your predecessor, George Diamond, I don't know if he came up with the phrase, but he kept referring to it as an asset light model, which is a bit like what we were discussing earlier on, where you take these bigger stores and maybe shift them somewhere a bit more urban, maybe a bit more foot traffic in a smaller model. And I guess that's kind of on a bigger, more legal scale what the CVA is, isn't it? It's about reshuffling the estate, as we've already just talked about.
Yeah, it's about enabling you to exit where it's just no longer sustainable or no longer the right location. It's also about enabling you to have discussions with landlords to agree more sustainable terms to remain in the properties too. So it's not just about exiting sites; it's about making the current sites more sustainable. That's what the CVA unlocks for you.
And speaking of discussions there that you just touched on, whenever anything like this happens, the rumour mill sort of in the industry starts up, doesn't it? And like I said, anytime anyone seems to do anything major, it starts up. Sometimes it's all doom and gloom. Sometimes it's really odd, surprising stuff. I mean, we get a lot of tips from people. You've probably been sick of me speaking to you guys all the time going, I've heard this, can you confirm whether that's true, or things to that effect. But how has it been for you? Because I know that when you go through a process like this, you're sort of limited in what you can say publicly, one, to not jeopardize things, but also I imagine just from a legal perspective. So how has it been with a lot of, rumors and speculation and talk going on for you guys? Because I can't imagine that helps the process or smooths it out for you.
Well, when things like this happen, it is inevitable that you will get speculation and rumours. The market's tough. It's inevitable that competitors will make hay. And we knew that. We knew that from the outset. We were prepared for that. And so our approach was really to kind of stay on the front foot and be really clear and really proactive with both our customers and our colleagues. And we proactively contacted every single customer with live orders in our order book. We made sure they understood what the process was, what we were going through, what it meant for them, and reassured them that their kitchen, wasn't impacted and that we would be there to support them throughout. Our colleagues were really well briefed throughout the process. We did a lot of communicating and we were very open with our colleagues. But that really helped prepare them as well for the customer conversations. And I think, that personal communication is really important in times like this. I think when lots of things are being said and written externally about you, what's most important is that your customers and your colleagues hear the facts directly from you. We are really pleased and humbled with the support that we've seen from our customers. The loyalty, has been incredible. And our colleagues have been outstanding throughout all of this. They really have. I think that strength in relationship that our people have with our customers is a real strength and asset to us anyway. And I think that's really helped us get through this process with our customers. And I think it's what really makes us, makes Magnet really different. And probably why, for me, the impact on our people was probably the hardest part of this whole journey. That the difficult decisions that you ultimately have to make. We have had to make difficult decisions. It has impacted some colleagues. We've been working really hard to redeploy as many of those colleagues as we can, which has been something that from the outset we've been really passionate about. Really minimising that impact. And we're really pleased to say that, to date, and obviously we're still working through some of this, over 30% of impacted colleagues have been redeployed into other Magnet roles. And where the geography doesn't allow, and sometimes that is the case and it's inevitable, we haven't stopped there in terms of just working within our own portfolio. We proactively reached out to other people in the sector, other businesses in the KBB sector. And a great example of that is Howdens. And we've worked with Howdens on kind of where they have job opportunities. And again, I'm really pleased to say that a number of our impacted colleagues have been able to find jobs in some of their depots too. And I think that's, a really great example of putting, your people first, despite, kind of the fact, yes, they're competitors and, but you can work together. And, I'm really proud of that. And we will continue to work hard to redeploy as many impacted colleagues as we can.
So when you talk about Howden there, first of all, it's brilliant that you guys are working with Howdens in that way, because I wouldn't have expected that, as you said, because you are technically competitors. But is that more Howden's coming to you, or is it you going to them, or was it sort of your goals just lined up?
Yeah, look, we had an open dialogue which we used with them to look at how we could explore together to support the people that are impacted, and I'm sure that will continue into the future.
Brilliant. Well, funnily enough, talking about national retailers, something I absolutely have to ask you about is sort of bizarre news story that really surprised me. After you'd announced the CVA proposals, we did a news story on national kitchen retailer launching a website, sort of trying to take advantage of maybe the confusion is probably the right way to say it, and saying to customers, if you're worried about Magnet store closures, come to us, don't worry, bring your deposits. I just quickly wanted to ask you about how that impacted you guys and whether you believe maybe that was slightly misleading from them.
Look, as I said earlier, the market's tough. Everyone's feeling, particularly those who have manufacturing as well as kind of retail, they're feeling the impact of the volume in the market at the minute. And so, as I said, our competitors will make hay, and use it as an opportunity for their gain. I think, again, back to what was most important was we were on the front foot with that, and we are, and we were in constant dialogue with our customers, with our colleagues, and being really clear in our communication. We promised that no customer order would be impacted, and no customer order has been impacted, and that's really important. And we've seen an incredible level of loyalty, as I said, from the customers in our order bank, and we've been really pleased with the level of retention. So, for us, it was all about proactive communication, being on the front foot, being prepared for that, which we were. And I think you come out of the other side stronger for it.
Have you found that the consumers genuinely, because this became a national news story as well, have they been relatively understanding about the process?
Yeah, and again, they have, and the reason why is because we've been really clear in our communication with our colleagues. So when customers ask about it, they can really clearly talk about what it is, why we're doing it, what it means. And again, with those customers that were already live in our order bank, we had that kind of open dialogue with too, and personally wrote to them, contacted them, called them to explain. And I think that has been really key.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's really good to hear as well. So I guess the only thing I really have to ask about now is, with a bit more context about the CVA and the process and how it's been for you guys, what are your plans going forward? Because obviously you're now in a totally different position to where you were a couple of months ago when this was announced. And you must have a whole new playing field open in front of you where you've sort of got what you wanted and you had your creditors vote pretty overwhelmingly to agree all those proposals. So where do you go from here?
Yeah, so I think, we talked a lot about the plans when we last caught up, but for us, some of the key focuses and what this is really unlocking for us is the ability to focus that time and energy now and investment in the right places is in our store estate. So we will continue to evolve. We'll evolve for our customers, we'll evolve for the channels that we operate in, and as how people continue to evolve in the way they consume kitchens, we'll be making sure we're in those right stores, in the right locations, in the right formats. As I said, Harrogate is a great example of our kind of next move in that space. And hopefully you will come and visit, George, and see for yourself. But it really is a stunning store in a great location, with fantastic footfall walking past the store every day. So that is where we're going to continue to kind of really push and make sure that kind of the store estate as we evolve moving forward is a sustainable one, and our kind of new format growth. And then I think the other area that's really key in terms of what next and where you'll see investment kind of moving forwards is in our people. So I've talked a lot today about the strength of our people. It's really important. It's a really clear part of Magnet's differentiation. And our designers ultimately are fundamental to who we are. And that's really key. So you will see us investing more in our people as we move forwards. A great example of that to bring that to life is recently, just a few weeks ago, actually, we communicated a new commission scheme for our sales designers. And we announced that to all of them a few weeks ago. It's a significant investment in our people, but I think it's a really clear signal of how important they really are. It's a real recognition of that great, what great performance looks like, what great customer experience looks like, outstanding, customer service, and what brilliant talent we have. And it's also, really key for us as we continue to attract great people and great talent into the business as we grow. So you will see more from us, and I'm sure I'll return again, George, to talk more about the plans around our people. But as a real strength and asset, we want to really invest in their growth, their development, the recognition, the expertise, and that will be a key focus for us as well.
So the last thing I just wanted to ask as well was, I know that obviously this all sounds broadly, which sounds kind of odd, almost paradoxical in a way, despite the seemingly unexpected CVA from an outside perspective, it actually does sound like you guys are broadly moving on the same trajectory as you were when we last spoke?
We're really happy with the progress. The market is going to continue to be challenging, I think, particularly for the remainder of the year. So we will, need to continue to evolve and adapt. That is a reality, I think, for all businesses out there right now. But we're really happy with the progress we're making on our plan, the pace at which we are delivering the change that's required, to continue to move this business forward and ultimately become a much more sustainable business for the future.
What is your sort of assessment on a very broad level for the kitchen market for the rest of the year, shall we say, maybe going into 2027?
Yeah, so we think it's going to be pretty flat this year from a year-on-year perspective. And I think the market's having to work quite hard at making that a flat market. We are definitely seeing some green shoots, in the contracts market for us in particular. We're definitely seeing some green shoots. And we don't necessarily see that customers aren't thinking about or dreaming about their next kitchen. We're just seeing delays in projects whilst, the cost of living is continues to rise and there's a lot of uncertainty. And we're definitely seeing a lot more procrastination. There's a lot more visits to sites, websites, and a lot more visits to stores, and a lot more kind of people remaining in that dreaming phase for longer. So the key is really going to be how we unlock that and move customers forward into the next phase. But I think, for this year, I think the outlook is pretty flat, with green shoots, meaning that hopefully 27 will start to turn a corner.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me to hear you say that, because that's quite broad across the board, isn't it? That maybe this is annoyingly another flat year. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to speak to you again, and great to hear about some of the things going on at Magnet as well.
Thank you, George. It's been a real pleasure.